Howdy folks, here we are in the old workshop again. Last Christmas my wife bought me a terrific present. It's a little angle grinder, and it came with a grinding wheel for metal and a thin cut-off wheel for metal. So I found myself an old crosscut saw and I took it apart. It's all rusted out. Got the old wooden handle off. Found some scraps of brass. So I'm going to see if I can use this to cut out a shape out of this saw blade and make a little carving knife or a whittling knife. I also made myself a tiny little forge out of a coffee can. All I did was to mix up some plaster of Paris and vermiculite, which you can buy at your garden supply store. So I put 2 parts of vermiculite to 1 part of plaster of Paris and enough water to make a mushy thing that doesn't drip or sag. And then I put another bottle inside here first, wrapped up in wax paper, and then just poured my plaster of Paris and vermiculite mixture around the plastic bottle. I drilled a hole in the side with a chunk of copper pipe so I can stick a propane torch into there. So it's good and dry now, but we'll take it outside and see if it works at all. Here I heated up my little forge with a propane torch and stuck in a couple of chunks of metal and heated them up until they were brilliant red hot. And I stuck them in a can of vermiculite to cool them down slowly. Heating up my little chunk of metal and then cooling it off slowly softened the steel, so now it's easy to drill or grind, or you can even cut it with a hacksaw because it's nice and soft. So I drew out my design. I guess you can't see it very clearly there for my little knife blade, and I punched a couple of spots in it. I don't have a proper center punch, so I just used a concrete nail, and now I'm going to drill out 2 holes 3/32 of an inch because I found myself a chunk of brass rod that's the same diameter, so that's going to be the 2 pins that hold it in the knife handle. I'll drill them out now. I always use a bit of oil to lubricate the drill bit whenever I'm drilling metal. There's the 2 holes done. I have to wear these magnifiers all the time now because I got glaucoma and my eyesight isn't as good as it was 50 years ago. Next we'll go over and grind this thing out. Well, next I'm going to start grinding out the shape of my little knife blade here. This quickly loses its glamour after the first minute or so, so I'll finish doing this and you don't have to watch the rest of it. Here's the shape that I ended up with off the grinding wheel. Oh, where are we? Here we go. So got a nice little tang here with my holes drilled in it for my brass rod, and I rough shaped the little blade, so now I'm gonna put it in the vise. And do a little filing to set the bevel on the blade. Remember when I was a kid, folks always told me to, when you're filing, just go in one direction, don't pull the file back and forth. So I'm going to do that. And again, this loses its glamour after the first minute or so, so I'll shut the video off and I'll get back to you later. Well, I filed myself a nice bevel on both sides of the blade. There it is. Now I'm just going to use a bit of fine sandpaper to clean this scale off that was left from the softening or annealing process, and then we're ready to go on to hardening this thing. See you later. Okay, I got my knife blade ready for hardening. I got the torch going here. I'm going to heat it up red hot and then plunge it into a jar of old motor oil to cool it off quickly. There we go. And what this did was to harden the metal and make it real brittle. So it's hard to file and drill now because it's been hardened. So we're going to leave that there for a while. Meanwhile, I found myself a nice little scrap of mahogany that was left over for making this banjo neck that I'm working on. And I made myself a little pattern for my knife handle. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut this piece in half, glue it to the two pieces together with double-sided carpet tape, and then cut this pattern out. So I'll be back as soon as I get this done. The last step in treating the steel is called tempering. After I pulled the little knife blade out of the motor oil, I wiped it off with a rag and polished it up a bit with some fine sandpaper. And then I popped it into my toaster oven, which is set at about 350 degrees. I'm going to leave it in there for a couple of hours, then turn it off, let it cool, and then turn it on again and let it heat up again for a couple of hours, and then turn it off. And that is the last step in treating your steel. So we started out with softening the steel, and then we made it hard, and now we're tempering it. Well, I wrecked my first little piece of brass, and then it hit me afterwards that it wasn't wide enough to accommodate those two halves of the handle. So I found another little scrap of brass, drilled a couple of holes in it, and then I threaded my little fret saw through there, and I'm just cutting out a slot so that I can fit the tang of my knife blade through there and into the handle. Got a little bird's mouth hunk of board here that holds it up while I'm sawing away. Spin it around. Brass is a nice soft metal, and it cuts real easy. There we go. So now I'm gonna get it off my little saw blade. There we go. Nice little slot cut for my blade. I'll have to file it out a bit, but basically there. Okay, this time it worked much better. I filed out a nice little slot in my chunk of brass, and the little knife blade fits into it nice. So now I'm gonna, I also glued together the two halves of the knife handle. I used carpet tape, and then I glued my pattern on top. So now what I'm going to do is I want to mark out the holes for the brass pins to go through. And then I can epoxy the whole thing together. So, got my old coping saw, and I'm going to cut it out on my little bird's mouth board here. And you can put your saw in here into this little slot, and then hack away at whatever you're cutting out. Well, yesterday I glued the two halves. First I carved a little slot on the inside of each part of the handle to accommodate the thickness of the knife blade. And then I mixed up a batch of J&B Weld, which is this stuff. It's epoxy. I treat myself to a package of it every time we go down to Grand Forks. I buy it at Menards. And then I tapped in the 2 brass pins and spread the epoxy on the inside and glued the whole thing together. Oh, I cut out a little oval to go at the back of the knife blade. That's the one that had the slot in it. Glued the whole thing together, so there it is. Looks really ugly now, but I'm going to start shaping the handle with my cabinet maker's rasp. Which is going to take a little while to do. And I got a hacksaw off the 2 brass pins and get it all shaped, and I'll be back to show you what it's like when it's finished. After I'm done shaping it, I'll sand it down, and then I'm going to fill the pores with the wood pores with some sealer and then put a finish coat on. Well, after spending a fair bit of time with my rasp and file and finer grades of sandpaper, I finally got my little knife finished. I got it sharpened up, and I even wood burnt my name and year on the handle there. Turned out pretty good. I put a little string to hang it up with. Here's a little chunk of basswood. So going across the grain, carves nice, feels real nice in the hand. So even though I made mistakes on making it, I still had a lot of fun doing it. So that's my first little knife. Hope all you folks enjoyed my video on how I made my first knife. God bless, and we'll see you down the road.